everyone, welcome back to WsCube. In our today's session, we will be talking about methods and constructors in OOPS. So I hope you guys have no doubts and no questions from our previous session where we learned about classes and objects. Today we will be talking about method and constructor. First of all, let's understand what are methods. Before that, if you want to become a successful data analyst and if you want to learn from our experts live, then you can call on the given number or you can fill the form that is provided in our description. Not just that, with our every batch you will be getting 2 demo classes for free. So guys, what are methods over here is, methods are nothing but they are the functions only but that we use inside the objects. So method is the other name of the functions, but because we use it inside the objects, that's why we call it methods. Right? Let's understand how a method can be created. So guys, I'll take an example over here. I'm creating a class employee. Along with the function, I'm creating a variable also over here that is named as employee ID. So I'll be writing employee ID. Okay, and I'm giving it a value as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's just a random value that there is an employee whose employee ID is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. After this, I'll be creating a function over here. Definition employee data, and I'll be passing the self parameter over here. After passing the self parameter, what I'll do, I'll try to print this employee ID over here. Okay, you can already see it's giving me an error, but still we'll try to print it. Okay, I'll be creating an object over here. For that, I'll be writing emp1 is equals to employee, open close the bracket. This will create my object, and if I will try to call this function, so to call this function, I'll need to write employee1 dot the name of our function, that is employee data, open close the brackets. If I run this program, you can see it says that name employee ID is not defined. So what I'll do over here, if I write self dot employee ID over here and now try to run it, you will see now it will get printed. So what is happening over here, that inside a function, when we are creating a method, it never takes the variable simply like that. It first takes the permission from the object, the first object that we have over here inside it, that is the self. Self itself is an object. It takes the permission from the self and then only it prints it. If we will not use self.employee ID over here directly, if we print the employee ID, this thing will not work. It will throw us an error. So what we need to do to get this employee ID or any kind of variable get printed inside our function, all we need to do is take permission from the self. To take the permission from the self, all we need to do is write self.employee ID. Now, as much number of variables you create, all you need to do is in front of them, you need to put a prefix self dot and whatever the variable name is. Right? This is called as method over here. So this is how methods are created. Now, even if you are not creating any variable over here, let's say I'm not creating this variable over here, but I'm passing more parameters over here. So what I can do, if I want to pass, let's say name and comma age. Okay. If I am passing name and age over here, inside it, if I write print name and age, and here with the employee data, while calling it, if I provided with these details that name is John and let's say age is 23, if I run it, this thing will work. So when we are providing a parameter right after the self, it will work. But at the same time, if we are using a variable, if we have a variable outside, then for that we need to ask the permission from the self and then we can use it and we can get it printed. But at the same time, if we are using a parameters right after the name of the self, then we don't need to take the permission from the self. We can provide with the parameters itself. Suppose over here after self, you only have 2 parameters, that is name and age. Then you have to pass only 2 arguments to it, that is John and 23. So the number of parameters will increase, the number of arguments will increase over here. But for the self, you don't need to provide any value. If I try to provide any value for the self, let's say if I try to add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 also and I put it and run it, it will tell me that 3 positional arguments but 4 are given. So we only have 3 positional arguments but 4 are given. For self, we don't need to give any argument over here, and it can directly and we can only write the 2 values, that is for the name and the age. And suppose if you want to create more of the objects, so you can create emp2, that is our employee 2. For employee 2, I'm declaring it object over here, and employee 2, I'll be calling employee 2 by writing emp2 dot employee data, and we can pass the values right after it. So I'll be adding Lisa, who is 25. So if I run it, I'll get the output like this. But at the same time, if I was using a variable over here with any data, suppose I would have written gender is equals to female. And if I try to print it over here, that print gender and run it, it will say that gender is not defined. But at the same time, if I write self dot gender, in that case it will give me female over here in both the cases, but where John is male, so we'll be considering that later, but I was just taking an example over here. So yeah, this is how it works. So in the methods, remember that the variable names cannot get printed directly. All you need to do is you need to take a permission from the self. So how to take a permission? All you need to do is write self dot and whatever is the name of your variable, and then it will get printed. At the same time, if you are not taking a variable, but you are taking a parameter, for parameter you don't need to take a permission from the self. This is how a method is created. Now next we'll be talking about the constructors in OOPS. So guys, constructor over here, inside the OOP we have initialize method init, that is called as init in short form, which is followed by 2 underscores on both the sides. So double underscore init double underscore is the initialize method that is used to initialize the class. Init means initialize over here. Now it says that the access is required to initialize the attributes of the class. Now what is attribute? Attributes are nothing but they are the different term for parameters and arguments. So don't get confused with the terms over here. Attributes are similar to parameters and arguments. If you want to access parameters and arguments of a class, we use initialize method. Now with the initialize method, there is one thing that we don't need to call it by its name. We don't need to call the initialize method. As soon as we call the class, we call the object over there, it calls itself. We don't need to call it specifically by providing a name to it. So initialize method, it calls itself. That is a good point about initialize method. Let's understand how a initialize method works over here in OOP programming. So guys, to understand constructor, what I'll be doing, I'll be using the similar example over here. As I said, initialize init is the constructor over here. All I need to do is write def. I'll write init over here, and yes, the self parameter. Okay, self parameter will also be used with our initialize method because self parameter itself is an object. Now with the initialize, we know that for initialize we don't need to call it. Initialize itself is a constructor, it calls itself. So inside it, whatever I will write, suppose if I write hello, here are the employee details, and if I try to run it, you will notice that here, hello, here are the employee details will automatically get printed, even though I'm not calling for it. I'm not calling for the, here I had to call for the function employee data and pass the arguments, pass the values to it. But at the same time, for initialize, I don't need to call this function. I can just directly write initialize with a self parameter, and inside it, whatever task I'll assign to it, it will automatically get printed. So this is our constructor initialize, that is init. So I hope guys what is method and what is constructor is clear to you. So constructor here in OOP is initialize method. So I hope you guys have no doubts and no questions. In our next session, we will be discussing about inheritance in Python. So stay connected guys. I'll see you in the next session. Thank you.